Hello, my name is Patrick Gunning, and you are currently listening to By Description Two Things. And on this episode, I am going to be describing podcasts. A podcast is an audio-only production that can be produced by a company of some sort or a random individual. A podcast is an audio file that downloaded from the internet and playback on any audio device. Producing a podcast is cheap and easy to make, and the individual needs little to no skill doing it. A podcast is available mainly from the internet, where a website set up by the podcaster, or through any podcasting hosting website. Any podcast covers a variety of subject, varies to what show that the listener is listening to. A podcast is somewhat different to a radio station, with some releasing their programs as a podcast for the listener to listen at a later time. A podcast can be boring or interesting for the listener to listen to, depending on what the podcast is. A podcast has not set limits of time on how a podcast should run, depending on what show it is. A podcast audio contains a file size may vary on what the podcast show that the individual is listening to. A podcast is like the modern day radio that a person can listen to at whatever time, day, and location. A person who hosts or presents a podcast show are often called a term podcaster. There are best things that came from a podcast that a person had listened to, like helping solve a crime or finding new skills, etc. I hope you enjoyed what I had described, and I hear or use listeners later. This podcast is written, announced, and produced by Patrick Gunning, and podcast is copyrighted 2022 by PFGON0.